Hey everyone, it's Megan here with Meghan Makes Do, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet the Concord granny vest. So what you're going to need are 3 different colors of this Made with Love, the cottony one. This yarn is from Lion Brand Yarn. It's a beautiful cotton and acrylic yarn, and it comes in some really great colors. So you'll need a main color and then 2 contrasting colors. So I'm using Marvelous Mushroom, Hot Cocoa, and Peter Pan for mine. For exact yardage amounts for your size, please look in the description below. You'll also need a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle, some buttons, which I'm still trying to decide exactly how many and which kind I'm going to use, but all that information will be in the description, along with a 4mm crochet hook. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so for our vest, we are going to be making these little 3 round granny squares, and we're going to be doing them in 2 different color options, and then we'll kind of checkerboard them together when we assemble our vest. So for the exact amount of each color option you're going to need, like how many squares you'll need for your size, you can find that in the description below. So I'm going to show you how to make the basic granny square using these 3 colors, and then I'm going to show you also how to make these granny triangles. So you'll need to make 2, 1 in each color option, and these are going to be at the very front neckline of our vest, but it's a little bit different than the squares because you're basically just making half of one. So let's go ahead and start with the granny square. So I'm going to start with one of my contrasting colors, and again you're going to be making a certain amount in this color option, which I'm going to demonstrate, and then you'll also need to make a similar amount in this color option as well. But for this tutorial, I'm just going to show you the basics of the granny square. So I like to start with a magic ring. So I'm going to wrap the yarn around my 2 fingers, making sure that they cross at some point. And then using my 4mm crochet hook, I'm going to go under the first loop, grab the second one, pull it through, and then kind of hold on to it with my right hand while I take my fingers out. So you'll see this is kind of what we have, and this is going to be our magic ring. So then in order to secure our ring, I'm going to pull this working yarn back, and we're going to chain 1 to secure it. Okay, so once you have your magic ring and your chain 1, we're ready to start working into that ring for round 1. So I like to make my granny squares using a chainless method. So I'm doing this alternate double crochet without chaining first. So I'm going to insert my hook and work a single crochet into that magic ring. Then going under this leg of my single crochet, I'm going to insert my hook and work a single crochet through that loop, just like that. So this is my first double crochet. Then I'm going to work 2 more double crochets as we normally do to complete that first cluster. So the granny squares are made with like clusters of 3 double crochet. And for this first round, we're going to have 3 clusters, and then we want to make our corners. And each corner consists of 2 chain stitches. So I'm going to chain 2, then I'm going to work 3 double crochet into the magic ring. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Chain 2 again, there's our second corner. And again, you can always slow this down with your YouTube settings or go back and rewatch a few times until you really have mastered it. Then work another 3 double crochet into the magic ring. There's 2 and 3. Chain 2 again, there's our third corner. Work another set of 3 double crochet into the magic ring. And then before closing up, we want to get that 4th corner in. So we're going to do another chain 2. And now we can pull on the end of our magic ring to close it up. And we're going to slip stitch to that first chainless double crochet that we made to join. Okay, so now we want to leave a little bit of a tail here. We're going to cut that off and fasten off. So this is our first round of our granny square. And to make the process go faster when you're making your Concord vest, I recommend making several of these first rounds, weaving in the ends, then making the second rounds, weaving in the ends, then making the third round, weaving in the ends. I feel like that goes faster because you're doing the same thing over and over and over. Just seems to go quicker for me. And I don't like saving all my ends till the last step because then, oh my gosh, it's just too much. So we're gonna weave in our ends as we go. So I typically start with that last end that we just cut off, and I'll show you how I like to weave in the ends on my grannies. So I'm going to go through this 3rd double crochet stitch here through both legs and bring my yarn to the back. So you can see we've made kind of like a little half stitch here on top of the second one. So then I bring my needle through the back leg of my slip stitch and the back leg of my second double crochet, and that's going to make the next part of it. So I'm kind of making a stitch on top of the other one. It makes it just a little bit more invisible from the front. And then I weave my ends in to the back. And if you're working with this yarn, again, you can sub with really any weight for yarn as long as your gauge is correct. The way that this one's made, it can be a little bit difficult to get those ends woven in. So just take your time. My thumb kind of started hurting after weaving in ends for a while. That's why it's kind of nice to do the crochet part first and then do some weaving in and then go back to the crochet to give your hands a little bit of a break. So I usually do 3 passes through until I know it's nice and secure, and cut off my end. And then you really want to just make sure that you're pulling that magic loop tight. You want as small of a hole in the center as possible. And then we'll just weave in this beginning tail. I basically just kind of go around the circle, going through all of those double crochet stitches. And this kind of helps tighten up the magic ring as well. So while granny designs are beautiful, they are a lot of work. It does take a lot of time, and there's a lot more ends to weave in than with a regular, row by row crochet project. But I think it's worth it for the end result. Okay, so I think that's good there. Cut this one off. All right, so now we're ready to do round 2. So we're gonna switch to the next color. And you just wanna start with the right side of your granny square facing you, and you're gonna start in one of the corners. So we're gonna work into those chain 2 spaces. So I'm gonna grab my next color here, leaving a little bit of a tail. We're gonna bring that yarn through with our hook and chain 1. And then again, we're gonna start with that same chainless double crochet. So I'm gonna work a single crochet and then work another single crochet into that left leg of the front of that first single crochet. So that's our 1 double crochet stitch here. I'm gonna work 2 regular double crochet stitches. Again, everything's being worked into this chain 2 space. Then we're going to chain 2 and work another set of 3 double crochets again into that same chain 2 space. So that's how all granny square corners are. You work 2 clusters with a chain 2 in between. Okay, so now we're going to be skipping over this granny cluster, but we want to chain 1, skip over it, and then we're going to do the same type of corner into this corner. So work 3 double crochet, chain 2, and then 3 double crochet all into that chain 2 space. And then we just keep repeating that all the way around. So we chain 1, skip over this 3 double crochet cluster, and work 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets into that corner stitch or the chain 2 space. And then repeat it one more time for this last corner here. So there's our last double crochet, and then before we join we want to chain 1, and then we're going to slip stitch to the top of that first double crochet stitch like that, and we can fasten off, leaving a little bit of a tail. Okay, so this is what you'll have at the end of round 2, and again I'm going to weave those ends in before I show you that third round. So I always kind of do this tail the same, making that like faux stitch on top, and then just weaving it into the back stitches here. Same with this one, I'm going to bring it up. I tend to weave both ends into the same little cluster here. So go ahead, and if you're following along with me, you can practice weaving in your ends as well for round 2, and then I will show you round 3. Okay, so I've gotten my ends woven in, and now for round 3, I'm going to use our main color here. We want to join our yarn into one of these side chain 1s, and leaving a little bit of a tail. Again, same thing, draw your loop through, chain 1, and then work your alternate double crochet, and then 2 regular double crochets, and that'll be your first cluster. Chain 1, skip over this set of double crochets and work a corner stitch in the corner. So again, that's the 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets. And then chain 1, work a cluster of 3 double crochets into that chain 1 space. Chain 1, and then work a corner stitch into that chain 2. And we just keep repeating that all the way around. So there's a chain 1 on the sides in between the clusters, and for the corners there's a chain 2 to keep it nice and square. Okay, so we're working our last corner here. And again, we're going to end with a chain one and then slip stitch into the top of that first stitch to join. There we go. And then we can fasten off and weave in those ends as well. So that's how you will be making your granny squares. Again, it's pretty quick and easy, just those 3 rounds, but you will have to make quite a few of them for your vest. And then I do recommend blocking them all. So I just kind of pin my corners down. It kind of just makes them a little bit more squared off-ish. But again, you'll be making 2 different color options of the squares. So go ahead and work on those. But next, I'm going to show you how to make that granny triangle. Okay, so for our granny triangles, we're going to be starting the same way with a magic ring and one of our contrasting colors. So again, chain 1 to secure, and then we want to work that chainless double crochet, which is basically just 2 stacked single crochets, and then 2 regular double crochets into that magic ring, and then chain 2 and work 3 double crochets again, all into that magic ring. Okay, and then we can pull our magic ring tight and we'll be fastening off this color. Okay, so we just are basically making these 2 little clusters here. It's basically making like one corner. And then I recommend actually waiting to weave in your ends on the triangles until the end, because I found that when I tried to weave the ends as I went, it got a little wonky and a little bit tight. But we want to always be starting on this right hand side here. So I'm going to grab our next contrasting color and I'm going to insert my hook into the top of that first stitch we made and join my yarn, and then chain 1, and we're going to work again that chainless double crochet and then 2 more regular double crochets all into that first stitch. Okay, then we chain 1 and we work a corner stitch into the chain 2 space. So that's 3 double crochets, oops, dropped it, and then a chain 2 and 3 more double crochets into that chain 2 space. Then chain 1, and you kind of have to hold this end a little bit tight here, but you're going to be working 3 double crochets into that last double crochet stitch. So it's going to want to kind of loosen up on you since we haven't woven in that end, but once we get those ends woven in, we can kind of tighten it up. Okay, and then again, fasten off. Go back to the beginning side here, and we're going to join our main color. And same as before, work that chainless double crochet and then 2 regular double crochets all into that first stitch. chain 1 and work 3 double crochet into that chain 1 space. Chain 1 and work a corner into that chain 2 space. And then again, chain 1, work a 3 double crochet cluster into that chain 1 space. And we'll be ending this the same as we did before with 3 double crochets into that last stitch. And then don't forget to chain 1 before you work that last cluster of double crochets. Okay, so now we can fasten off. And we've made our little granny triangle. And you might notice, and it kind of stays that way a little bit, but it'll work out fine since we're only using 2 triangles in this whole pattern. But you'll notice the right side tends to be a little bit tighter than this left side. And that's just due to those fastened off stitches. So as you weave in ends, you can kind of pull those in tighter. But yeah, you'll just go ahead and weave in all of the ends for your triangle, and then it will look like this. And again, you can block those triangles as well. So once you have all of your granny squares and your 2 granny triangles set and ready to go, I will meet you back here and I will show you how to lay those out and seam them together. Okay, so when we start assembling our Concord vest, we're going to start with the back panel. So I have, you know, my 2 bottom rows of squares ready to go, but I'm going to be using just the first few to kind of show you how this process works. What I like to do is I'm using the slip stitch method. So we're going to be kind of doing almost like a top stitching with slip stitches to join our squares. First, we're going to join them horizontally. So by rows, like each row will be joined together. And then we're going to do the vertical lines up, like joining the columns together. So it's going to be a little flimsy to start, but once we get more of those vertical rows attached after we do our horizontal ones, it'll become a solid piece of fabric. So in order to do this, we're going to start with just these first 2 squares here. So I'm going to kind of put my other ones to the side here so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. Okay, so we're going to start with a slip knot using our main color, and we're still using our 4mm hook. So I'm going to put a slip knot on my hook. And then what we're going to be doing is going through the back loops only all along each edge of our granny square. So we want to go through this side first and then this side. So you can see here we have our 2 chains, 1, 2. We're going to go into this second chain, just the back loop. So insert your hook, and you kind of want to make sure that your working yarn is kind of coming this way between the seams, or between the squares, I guess. So it's going to be like underneath our seam. Okay, then we're going to go in through the top of the back loop of this second chain here. And then we want to grab our working yarn, and we're going to draw our yarn through Oop. Hold on. I feel like I have to have my working yarn like underneath everything. So, okay, so in through one side, back loop, in through the second side, and then kind of bringing that working yarn from underneath. This first stitch is always the hardest. You're going to yarn over and draw through all of those loops. Okay? So then again, just going back and forth. So through the back loop on the first square and the back loop of the next stitch on the second square, yarn over, draw your yarn through all of those loops. And we're just going to go back and forth. So back loop of the granny on the right, back loop of the granny on the left, yarn over, and draw the yarn through all those loops. So we're kind of doing like a surface slip stitch here while still joining our square. So it's a little bit finicky. Take your time with this, go slow. If you need to rewind and watch how I started again, feel free to do that. But the trick is really to keep that working yarn at the bottom and make sure that your hook and your loops are going over the top. You never want it to come above your hook. So again, in through that back loop. And we just want to make sure that we're going through each stitch that coordinates with the other one. But they should line up perfectly since all of our squares are the same. We have the same number of stitches on each side. But we're just going to continue until these two squares are joined together. But I think this method gives it a nice finished look on the seams. It also, I think, is a little bit faster than using a needle. And it's a lot easier since you're just working with the yarn right off of the skein. You don't have to worry about too many ends to weave in or get worried about if you've pulled a long enough tail. Okay, so I think I just have these chain stitches, the first chain stitch, the back loop of the first chain stitch on each square to go through. Okay, so here you can see what that's going to look like. It gives it a nice clean finish. I love this little extra stitch detail on the top. So now we want to grab our next two squares. And we're doing the same thing, but we're not fastening off. We're going to just keep this horizontal seam going. So again, make sure that your working yarn is underneath. Find that first chain stitch, the back loop of that chain stitch of the corner on your right square. Same thing on your left square. And then we can draw our working yarn through all the loops that we have on our hook. And then we just continue the same way we did with the first one. And once you get the hang of it, it does go pretty quickly. Just know it's going to be a little finicky. And it might feel a little bit awkward until we get those vertical seams going too. But I always like to do my horizontal seams first and then go back and do my vertical seams. So you'll do the same technique for both front panels as well. And then we'll also use this technique when we seam the shoulders and the sides together. I think I went through more than one back loop. There we go. So we're almost to this last stitch here into those chain stitches at the corner. And then we can add our next set of squares. So see how it just kind of goes nicely across. We're joining everything together. So you'll continue doing that for these first 2 rows, and then you'll move up and add the next row in the same manner. And then just continue to work from the bottom of your back panel up, and then same for your front panels. So make sure that you're following along with the schematic that is there for your size. And then once we get all of the horizontal lines together, I can show you kind of how we work these vertical seams as well, kind of going over top of the horizontal ones. So go ahead and get all of your horizontal seams for your back panel done, and I'll meet you back here and show you the vertical ones. Okay, so now that I have finished doing my horizontal seams on my back panel, now we want to start doing the vertical seams, and I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up, going along those vertical lines. So we'll start the same way we did for the horizontal lines by placing a slip knot on our hook. And then again, we're going to start on this right side and then go over to the left side. And again, we want to kind of make sure that our yarn is underneath our project. So I'm just going to kind of slip it back here. Okay, so that way, when we do our slip stitches, everything is underneath our project. And this first one can be a little tricky to get through. There we go. And again, we're just going to be going back and forth just through those back loops of the stitches. So first into the right and then into the left, yarn over and draw that yarn all the way through all of those stitches, and that will give us a nice surface slip stitch on the top. So you'll notice when you're doing the vertical seams that since your yarn is underneath, but you've already attached the horizontal ones, it can be a little tricky to grab the yarn because you can't always see it. So just make sure you're keeping your hook above the yarn when you're inserting it onto either side so that you can easily grab the yarn and pull it through. So we're almost to this first corner here, and then I'll show you kind of how it looks when you're going over top of that horizontal seam. So here's like our corner stitches here. And then we're just gonna go over top of that horizontal seam. So here's the first corner stitch of the next 2 squares. And this one's always a little bit tricky. I go through the first loop and then I kind of have to help get this second loop over top of my working yarn. But I've just kind of slip stitched over that horizontal line. And now I can continue as before. And we're just creating a nice vertical seam with that surface slip stitch join. And we'll do this all the way up. We'll do this for each vertical seam. And then as I get closer, I kind of go into the next gap here in between. I find it's a little more easy to grab my yarn underneath. Oh my goodness, if I can actually grab the working yarn and not a tail. There we go. Okay, so we just continue all the way up and we just go over top of those horizontal seams with our slip stitches. So I'll show you one more time. We've gotten to this last corner stitch. And then we just continue right on top and go into the first corner stitch of each of the next 2 squares. Making sure I'm only going through 1 loop. And then again, you might have to help get that first loop on the right side through. Okay, but here you can see we're getting that nice vertical line going up here. And once I finish this, I'll do the next one going all the way up until the whole back panel has been done. And then I'll repeat the same process for both front panels. And then I'll meet you back here and show you how to do the same thing for the shoulders and the sides. Okay, so now that we have all 3 panels seamed, you can see here I haven't seamed up the sides. So I have my first front panel here, back panel, second front panel here. So now to connect them, we just want you to use the same technique we were using before and make another vertical seam attaching the back panels, or the back panel to the front panels here. And then we can fold it over and we will do a horizontal seam with the front panels to the back panel. All right, so my sides are seamed, and now if we flip it over, so the wrong side is up, and then just fold our front panels over, we can line up our shoulder seams. So depending on what size you're making, you should, either way, you should have at least 2 squares unworked at the end for the neckline. But you can kind of see how with our triangles, we get a nice like V shape here. So all we have to do is, again, using the same seaming technique, seam the 2 squares for each shoulder across here, and then weave in our ends, and I'll meet you back here and show you how to do all the finishing trims and the button band. Okay, so I've seamed everything together and I'm ready to work my border and sleeves around the armhole. I did end up going back and adding these triangle grannies on either side, which if I open up you can kind of see, for the extra large 2X, and then also for the bigger sizes after that, you're gonna have 2 squares in the underarm. And so then you'll also add these triangles here to kind of bring that underarm a little bit closer together, because it was just ending up way too big and boxy. So you'll either have this, or you're gonna have 1 square in your underarm. So each underarm area and armhole area is going to be slightly different. I'm going to show you kind of the basics with this. If you don't have the triangles, if you have like a straight across, it'll be slightly different to start, but then the rest of the armhole, it'll be about the same, and you'll still do the next rounds, like the 2nd through 4th rounds will all be the same for all sizes. So bear with me here. Make sure that you are looking at the written instructions and following along for your size. But if you're making the sizes extra large on up, then this is what it will look like. But we want to join our yarn in the center of our underarm. So that's either going to be in a seam here, or it's going to be in the center stitch here of your square if you're doing the smaller sizes, the medium and large, I believe. So here we just want to, I'm actually going to go into the seam and then kind of around this join here. And we want to attach our main color yarn. Oops. My stitch kind of split there. Okay, there we go. Nope, still didn't get in all the way. Okay, there we go. And then we want to chain 1, and we're going to work a chainless double crochet here, same as we did for our granny squares, and then 2 double crochets into that same spot. So this is our first double crochet cluster that makes up our granny stitch, and we're going to be using a granny stitch going all the way around the armhole. So then we chain 1, and here you can see we have our triangle. Okay, so if we're going up the triangle here, we want to work a granny stitch here in this spot. So we're going kind of like 2 rows over, and we're going to work those 3 double crochets into that space where the colors join. Chain 1, we're skipping over these 2 clusters and working another 3 double crochet into the next join space where we've changed colors. Chain 1, and then here we want to work a granny stitch here in this corner. Okay, and then we also want to work a cluster, so chain 1 and work a cluster of double crochets into this corner of this next square. Chain 1, and then we want to work a double crochet cluster in these next 2 chain 1 spaces, and then we'll work into the seam here. So we're just kind of trying to evenly space out these granny stitches along our armhole. So here we've got these 2 corners very close together. So we want to work just into this seam, and I kind of like to go kind of not into this first part here, but down here into that stitch, and then just kind of draw up a longer loop for those double crochets, at least the first one, to get the right height. But you're going to work 3 double crochet into the seam, chain 1, and then continue working clusters into the chain 1 spaces and the seams all the way around until you get to the top of that last triangle, or to the next square or seam, depending on what your armhole looks like. Okay, so I've gotten around to the next triangle, and here, since we have the 2 seams close together, I'm going to work 1 cluster into this corner, just as I did on the other side. Chain 1, and then I'm going to work into this seam here where the triangle meets the granny square. And then just in the same spots as we did on the other triangle, I'm going to work clusters here and here. And then we should be all the way back around, chain 1, and we can join to that first stitch here, Okay, and that's the end of round 1. So no matter what your armhole looks like, you want to get this initial granny square round put in place. And if you're finding that it's getting too tight or too loose, you can always adjust where you're putting those granny stitches. It doesn't have to be exactly how it is here. You can make an adjustments yourself to get the right fit and size that you prefer. But for rounds 2 through 4, they will all be the same. So we're going to slip stitch over these next 2 double crochets and then into that chain 1 space. Then we can chain 1, and we're going to work our granny cluster here, and we're going to start with that chainless double crochet and then 2 regular double crochets into that chain 1 space, and then chain 1 and work 3 double crochets into the next chain 1 space. And we just repeat that all the way around, working those clusters into those chain 1 spaces, and then we will slip stitch to the top of our first stitch to join. And then same thing for the next 2 rounds. You're going to slip stitch over until you're in that chain 1 space, work your chainless double crochet, 2 double crochets, and then chain 1, double crochet for 3 double crochets into that chain 1 space. You get the idea with the granny stitch until you have done 4 rounds. Or if you have extra yarn, you can also make your sleeves a little bit longer if you like. You can add 5, 6, 7, however many rounds to get the length and where you want it to hit on your upper arm. But I'm gonna go ahead and finish up my next few rounds, and then I'll meet you back here and we will do the front like button band collar all the way around the rest of the vest. Okay, so here you can see that I finished my armhole like sleeve area here, and now we are ready to make our border and button band around the entire front and bottom part of our vest. So what you're going to want to do is flip it over on the back, and you want to join it in this center seam between the 2 neckline squares. So we're going to go into those like surface slip stitches here and attach our main color. And then just like how we did on the sleeves, chain 1, and we're going to start with that chainless double crochet start. And then work 2 more regular double crochets into that same space. And we're going to work 1 round of the granny stitch all the way around. So chain 1, and then we're going to skip over these corners since we already have a cluster here in the seam. But in these 2 chain 1 spaces, we'll work our 3 double crochet clusters like we normally would for our granny squares or granny stitch. Okay, so then here we have 3 corners that have come together, and we want to kind of like bring that together. So we're actually going to be working 1 double crochet into each one of these corner stitches, and that's going to create our little 3 double crochet cluster. So 1 double crochet into the corner of our current square, 1 double crochet into this square here, and then 1 double crochet into the next square that goes kind of down towards the front of the vest. So these 3 stitches here kind of act as a granny cluster. Chain 1, and we're going to work double crochets, 3 double crochets into the chain 1 spaces. Making sure we have a chain 1 in between. each cluster. And then when we get to this part where we have our corners meeting, we're going to work the cluster into those seam stitches. And if you have to go kind of down, depending on how you've woven in your ends, you can always go down here into the stitch and just draw up a longer stitch to get that double crochet to the right height. But work your cluster into the seam, chain one, and then work into the chain one spaces of the squares. So we're just trying to evenly create those granny clusters all the way around the front and bottom edges of our vest. Okay, so we've gotten to this area here. It's almost like a corner where we have 3 pieces coming together. So these 2 squares and this triangle here. So I've chained 1, and what we want to do is we want to work 1 double crochet, kind of how we did in the first corner up here by the neck. We want to do 1 double crochet into this corner, and the corner of the triangle. So we're just working 3 double crochets across those 3 corners, and that will act as a double crochet cluster. So then for the triangle, we're going to skip this space here, and into this space where the color join is, we'll work another 3 double crochet cluster. Chain 1, and then we're going to skip this center space and work again in that opposite spot where the color changes. 3 double crochet cluster again. Chain 1, and then here where we have 2 pieces coming together, we want to turn this into a corner. So we're going to work a 3 double crochet cluster here at the corner of the triangle. So 1, 2, and 3, and then make it like a corner. So we're going to chain 2, and then into this corner of the next square, we are also going to work 3 double crochets. And then continuing down the front side of our vest, we'll work a 3 double crochet cluster into each chain 1 space and seam all the way down. When we get to the bottom corner, we'll work that corner stitch. So 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet, all into this corner, work all the way around again, get to the next side and work a corner stitch, and go back up until we get to this spot here on the other side of our vest. So I've gotten all the way around, back up the other side of my vest, and here is where we want to make that corner stitch again. So I've already chained 1, and we want to do a cluster into this corner of this square. Chain 2, and then also work a cluster into the corner of the triangle. And that's going to give us a nice like boxy corner at the top where the button band will be. Chain 1, same as the other side, we're going to be working clusters of 3 double crochet into this spot and this spot. the table on me. There we go. And then we're gonna do that almost like a, I guess you could consider it kind of like a decrease in the other corner, kind of going the opposite direction. So like this is a corner, but this is also a corner. Okay, so again, just like the other side, we're gonna put 1 double crochet into the corner of the triangle, 1 double crochet into this square corner, and 1 double crochet into this square corner. And that will kind of make up a granny cluster because we'll have 3 double crochet stitches there. And that just kind of pulls it in, gives it more of a squared off look. And then chain 1, and again, going back up the straps, we'll do our granny clusters into each chain 1 space and into each seam with a chain 1 in between. Okay, so we've gotten to kind of like around, this is the back of the neckline. So we have the same thing happening here where we have 3 pieces coming together. So just as we did on the other side, we're going to do those 3 double crochets, so 1 in each corner, again, to kind of create a cluster there. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, and then we have 2 more clusters before we join. So chain 1, and then we're going to slip stitch to that first stitch of this round to join. Okay, so now we're going to be working all the way around again, but we're going to be creating buttonholes. So we'll be creating buttonholes on the right hand side of our cardigan. So for the most of this piece, we're going to be doing just single crochets into each stitch. So chain 1, this is round 2 of the edging or the collar. Single crochet into that same stitch as your join, and then we're going to single crochet into each double crochet and chain 1 space. And you can either go into the chain 1 or you can just work around the chain 1, whichever you prefer. But we're going to single crochet all the way around. But when we get to those corners, we're obviously going to have to do something a little bit different in order to keep those corners nice and squared off. So here we have these 3 double crochets. We're going to actually work a single crochet 3 together over those 3 double crochets. So we just yarn over and draw up a loop through each stitch. We'll have 4 loops on our hook. We yarn over and draw through all 4 loops. Then just continue on working 1 single crochet into each stitch until we get to that next set of those 3 double crochet kind of towards the bottom of our neckline. Okay, so we've gotten to the next set where we have these 3 separate double crochets. So we're going to do the same thing and work a single crochet 3 together over all 3 of those stitches, and then continue working a single crochet into each stitch until we get to that corner cluster. or I guess that chain 2 space, which is right here. So working into the chain 2 space where the corner is, we want to work a single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, all into that chain 2 space. So that's how you'll work the corners here at the top of the button band and at the bottom on both sides. And when you get to those inverted corners here where they have the 3 double crochet, that's where you'll work a single crochet 3 together. So we're just going to continue working all the way around until you get to the other side of the vest, the right hand side, until you get to this bottom corner of the right hand side. So continue working 1 single crochet in each stitch, and then I'll meet you back here when we get to the right hand side and show you how to add those buttonholes. Okay, so we're here now on the right side of our vest, and this is where we're going to be creating buttonholes. And what we want to do is, starting down here in this center stitch here, that's where our buttonhole is going to be made. And then we're going to do every other cluster, we will make a buttonhole until we get to this top corner part up here by the first triangle. So I'm going to work a single crochet into the first double crochet of the cluster, and then I want to make my buttonhole. So I want to make kind of like a loose chain 1 and then single crochet into that last double crochet, and that's going to make a hole here. That's going to make our buttonhole. Then again, we just continue to single crochet into the chain 1 space and in each double crochet. So we don't need to make a buttonhole in this cluster, but in the next cluster we will. So single crochet in the first double crochet, make a loose chain 1, and then single crochet in the last. So every other cluster, that center stitch is going to become a buttonhole. So here's our next one. Again, single crochet, loose chain 1, skip over that center one, and single crochet in the next. So just continue in this fashion, making a buttonhole in every other cluster until you get to that top corner where your triangle is. So here's my last buttonhole, and now we're at the chain 2 space. So we're going to work that corner by doing a single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, all into the chain 2 space, and then continue working 1 single crochet into each stitch until we get to the cluster that's at the top of this granny triangle. Okay, so here you can see these 3 double crochets. What we want to do is work a single crochet 3 together in that spot, and then again continue on all the way around, and you'll do the same thing in these 3 double crochet stitches here, and then join to our beginning single crochet to end this round. Okay, so I'm going to slip stitch to join, And then for round 3, we want to chain 1, and we're basically doing the same thing. We're going to single crochet into each stitch, but when we get to the corner areas where we did the double or single crochet 3 together, we want to work another single crochet 3 together, which I can show you on this first one that goes around the neckline. So here's the single crochet 3 together that we did. So I've got 2 or 1 more stitch. So you want to do a single crochet 3 together with the one before the previous one and the one after. So these 3 stitches we will work together, and then keep single crocheting in each stitch until you get to this inside corner here in the front neckline. Okay, so here's the 3 double crochet or 3 single crochet together from the row below. So we're going to work into the stitch before and after and work a 3 single crochet together over those 3 stitches, and then go down this front angled piece where the triangle is until we get to that corner. Okay, so here's our corner. We have our single crochet and then this chain 1 here, which is kind of hard to see, but we want to work into that chain 1 space, working a single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, all into that chain 1 space, and then again single crochet all the way down the front left side of our vest. And when you get to this bottom corner here, you'll do the same thing as we did here by working that single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, continue single crocheting in each stitch all the way around the bottom. And when you get to this corner, the corner on the other side, do the same corner stitch, and we'll actually be working into the buttonholes on the other side. So I'm going to get all the way around there, and then I'll show you what it looks like to work into the buttonholes. Okay, so we're coming up to a buttonhole. So we're going to single crochet into the stitch before, and then just as we have been doing around those chain 1s, we're just going to single crochet into that buttonhole space, and then in each single crochet all the way up. And then just make sure you're working those same decreases where you need to on those corners. So you can see it's a very subtle buttonhole, but it should be big enough to fit your buttons through. And it does, and you don't want it to be too loose, you want it to be rather tight, so that way it will actually hold that button in place once you close it up. So just continue to work all the way around until you've gotten to back where you started on that neckline, and then slip stitch to join. So now that we have our collar all done, obviously I still need to weave in some ends, but adding the buttons on this is actually pretty simple since we know where our buttonholes are and we made them in that 3rd double crochet of these clusters. We just need to line up those clusters. So here's the first cluster here, there's where the buttonhole is. So on this cluster, we know we want to attach our button right here where that center double crochet is on this first cluster. And then since it's every other cluster, so I know I'm going to attach a button there. Every other one, I'll put a button to line up with our buttonholes. So I will show you kind of how I like to sew on my buttons with one as an example. Okay, so I have my tapestry needle with a long tail of yarn attached for sewing on my button. Here's that center double crochet that lines up with the cluster that has the buttonhole. So kind of around this single crochet stitch here is where I want to attach my button. So I'm going to bring my yarn up, leaving a little bit of a tail for weaving in, and then bring my button on, and I'm going to make an X and just kind of bring it onto the other side of that single crochet stitch, and then come up through the opposite hole and back down through the last hole so that it's attached through all holes. Okay, so we'll have like a little X on our button, and then we can just tie these ends together in a tight knot. And then weave those ends in. And then you can see when we put the button through the buttonhole, it's nice and lined up with those clusters on either side. So I'm just going to repeat that for all the buttons all the way down. So like I said, every other granny cluster is going to have a button attached because that's where we made our buttonholes on the opposite side. And then those will all nicely line up all the way down the front of your vest. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial, and as always, you can find in the description below links to the free pattern, the PDF pattern, and the complete kit from Lion Brand Yarn. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can stay up to date with all things Meghan Makes Do.